All right, Florida State and the ACC, we're back in court today. Doug is on a massive trip right in the middle of the College World Series. So we've, went to the bullpen and called a reliever. I've got Hal Martinborough on. Some of you guys may know him as All Noles. If you know, you know. If you don't know what that's from, then you might be too young or just not familiar. But Hal, thanks for joining us, man. I know you were there at the courthouse for part of the proceedings today, and I do really appreciate you for coming on and pinch hitting for us with Doug out of town.
Yeah, happy to be here. I'm really into all this stuff, so I love being able to help make it make sense.
Yeah, I've talked to a ton of people. Speaking of baseball, Johnny Mack with the Animals told me, like, Doug does, and the attorneys that have really kind of covered this and talked it through, they do a good job of like cutting through the legalese and making it where we can kind of understand what's going on. And he even said, like, I wish we had that for like every aspect, like not just this thing that we really want, like getting out of the ACC, but like, real estate and insurance and everything else. Like, we could just break it all down.
If it starts impacting the teams you love, then you'll learn about it.
Yeah, you'll jump right in. So, all right, we'll be quick tonight. But long story short, Judge Cooper in Tallahassee in Leon County didn't get through everything today, but we are going to talk about the two things he did get through and then just kind of opine on the rest of it. But the first thing that really took up the majority of the day and really has taken up the majority of 2 days has been this idea of jurisdiction, where the case should be held, why Florida's the right place, the ACC, why Florida is not the right place. And ultimately, I mean, won't bury the lead. Florida State won on that, right? He did
right.
He denied.
Let me just, if you don't mind, I want to get back just because there's one little thing you said I want to make sure we get clear. So the jurisdiction is not about which court it should be in. Jurisdiction is about which courts have the power over the parties. So in other words, the North Carolina courts can have jurisdiction. Florida courts can have jurisdiction, but then you fight about, well, what's going to happen? Where should it be? Right. But today was only about, it's funny, the judge kind of did it backward. The judge at the first hearing said, I'm going to keep it here. But he didn't address the jurisdiction issue at that point. And then later on, the jurisdiction issue got backward.
So today, when that was coming up, were you worried at all about that? Or we talked before this, tell the listeners kind of your thoughts on the jurisdiction and why Florida State ended up not having that dismissed.
So I think the FSU position on jurisdiction has always been right. When it went wrong a few weeks ago and the judge dismissed the case and had them replead it, it was only because the judge thought they needed to actually put more specific claims in the complaint to justify the jurisdiction. But it never occurred to me that there wasn't going to be jurisdiction here. In fact, when the ACC filed their response to the AG's mandamus complaint, and then they actually filed the motion to dismiss on jurisdiction to FSU's amended complaint, I was really surprised how hard they attacked it. I felt like I was back in first year civil procedure again because they were attacking every little bit of it. But I didn't think that there would be much chance that we wouldn't be kept in court there.
So the ACC's idea was that the business really isn't taking place in Florida, and Florida State's argument was every part of our business is essentially taking place in Florida with relation to this case. It just wasn't the strongest argument from the ACC to be able to prove that.
Yeah, I think it's a hard thing to do. I mean, jurisdiction is about basically the idea of, is it fair for a state to rule over a party? Like you wouldn't want to get sued by somebody in Alaska about something you've never had anything to do with Alaska, and you get dragged into court over that. Just doesn't make any sense. It's not fair. That kind of idea doesn't work at all for the ACC that has two members in Florida, that makes millions of dollars out of Florida, that contracts through bowls in Florida. And, as the judge simplified it and just said, well, they basically run a media business for at least two teams in Florida. So they at least can be pulled into court.
Yeah, which makes sense. So the judge, the ACC obviously asked for that count to be dismissed. It wasn't.
Yes.
That count was denied. The dismissal of that count was denied. The second one, though.
Yeah, well, that would have been a dismissal of the whole case. If there's no jurisdiction, the judge would never get to any other issues.
We would have never had anything else. So because of that,
right.
We'll talk in a minute about the chance of an appeal there, what the likelihood is. But first, the second count was about the exit fee, right? The Florida State alleging it's a penalty, ACC saying it's not. What obviously the court case wasn't dismissed here either, the count. But thoughts around that one?
So after they got past the jurisdiction, then the ACC had multiple different reasons, claims to dismiss different counts of the FSU complaint. The judge didn't get to most of them, but I'm trying to remember which was the first one again, because we had the two of them. We had the exit fee.
Exit fee. Right.
The first issue, and it's important to keep this in mind, because I think reading on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, some people are thinking like FSU just won this issue, and today was very good on this. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is what we wanted to have happen. But the only thing the judge was doing today was saying, even if I assumed everything FSU says, is there just not even a legal basis to bring this claim? It's a hard standard for them to meet, and the judge did not buy that at all. I do think that I didn't get to hear that part of the argument because the feed went out and I was at a meeting. But the ACC has some pretty good arguments on that. I've read everything that they've filed. I've read the cases that they've cited, and I was actually surprised at some of the arguments they can make. But Judge Cooper was not sold by them, and he denied that motion to dismiss. So at least as of now, that count will still go forward.
Yeah, and when you mention that, just very big picture, very broad. Florida State is suing because you mentioned something like people were celebrating the win, but it's a minor win, right? Like now it would have been a major loss,
Yeah, perspective. Exactly.
Yeah. But it's Florida State sues the ACC, says these are the reasons we're suing them, and the ACC is basically just trying to get the judge to say there's not even a legal ground for them to say that they're suing us here, right? Like you said, a very high bar. These are expected wins. Maybe this is like Boston College on a Monday night.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, that they are. I do think that this one issue could have been a little bit more difficult, just because of the issue about applying North Carolina law, and they have some really bad law on this. So I do think that could have gone the other way, but I didn't expect it to. That's the legal sufficiency of this will continue to be argued all the way through the case.
I'll get right back to chatting with Hal, but I want to give some love to our friends over at gotspears.com. This week, you can get 6-foot spears for just $100. It's a limited time offer. You can also get the 6-foot with the torch for $165 as well. There are some other deals going on at gotspears.com. We've told you about them. We continue to tell you about them. Make sure that you get your spears so that you have it in time for the season. You can pick it up in Tallahassee quickly for free if you are local. So make sure that you get your spears before the season starts. We appreciate God Spears for their support. So a lengthy proceeding today. We were talking a little bit before it even happened, and we're thinking that things might move quickly, and Judge Cooper did not move very quickly through things. But there were other counts that should have gotten a ruling on, or thought we would get a ruling on today. And tell us how all that played out and what to expect with all of the other things that the ACC was arguing to be dismissed.
Okay, so as you said, the judge didn't get to a bunch of it, and they were at the end of the day and trying to figure out what to do. From what I heard them saying, the judge offered at first to stay late tonight, and then I think the bailiff came over and said, "Judge, we can't stay late for security reasons," so that fell. He offered them a hearing date to continue arguing on Friday, and a number of the lawyers couldn't do it. I couldn't hear because, when they get away from the podium, you can't hear quite as well. But they apparently agreed that they were just going to have Judge Cooper rule on the remaining motions to dismiss without additional hearing. So basically, he looks at the motion to dismiss, he looks at the response, he just does it based on the briefs. And I don't know how long that will take.
Yeah, ideally, maybe 2 weeks max, but who knows, I guess.
Yeah, it's hard. Some of these are complicated issues, and some of them are not complicated issues. It really depends kind of how deep into the weeds it gets. I think I was telling you before, that the timing of how much time these folks are spending doing these arguments is interesting, because we've probably had 15 or 16 hours of jurisdiction arguments now. But what's funny is if the jurisdiction issue goes up on appeal, each side will get 15 minutes to argue it. That's it.
Yeah. And
so it seems like we're taking a lot of time.
Let's talk a little bit about that. If it does go up to appeal on the jurisdiction issue,
okay,
how do you feel? Speculate on, could that get overturned, or do you feel like that, the Florida State side of this is pretty solid?
It could. Anything could. I get attacked for not being all fan based, and I try to be objective. I can't even be objective enough to think that we would lose that issue on the appeal. Anything could happen. Maybe something weird happens. But I really do think that was an argument that they were making just because they have to make it. Again, even if they had a small chance of winning it, if they win it, they win big because the case leaves Florida.
So,
but I think on the appeal they'll lose that. I think the bigger issue on appeal is going to be the petition, the cert petition that's up right now on the motion to stay the whole case. I think that's something that they want to win more, and I don't know what will happen with that.
and that's currently up for appeal. Like they've already submitted that.
They have, yeah. There's already two appeals pending.
And what's the major concern there, or just the uncertainty with that one?
Well, that's the issue of what do you do when you've got this issue pending in two different states. We've been arguing about this since December, but it's a really difficult issue because it doesn't happen all that often. If you get one of these cases stayed and the other case then goes into final judgment, that other case is going to control. So if the courts were to say, yeah, we're not going to decide it here in Florida, we're going to send it to North Carolina, then North Carolina has 100% of the control of how this ends. Now, I don't know that changes it significantly. I don't think judges rule just based on where they went to school, but I don't think that you can ignore that everybody's got biases and everybody's got people are fans and people live in their cities, and if it's a really close call, maybe you get the benefit of the doubt. So we want to be in our own venues, sure. And that's going to be that big issue.
I think there are 9 total counts that I've got a tweet here that you kind of ran through them. Is there anything that you would say massively sticks out there? Breach of contract was number 3. Sovereign immunity, Florida State not waiving that's number 4. ACC also to seek to dismiss statutory antitrust claim. Number 5 was that one. 6 is claiming the granted rights penalty scheme fails for other reasons. ACC's challenge each of them. Next ACC claim is that the FSU count alleging unconscionable penalties or contracts should allow it out of the grant of rights. That's 7. 8, the claim that the purpose of the contract has been frustrated. ACC disagrees there. And then finally, the ACC raises some issues we don't see in a motion to dismiss. It raises the issues of waiver and estoppel to suggest that FSU can't complain about these details due to the time of how we've talked about that with Doug. Just it's been so long. Why are you why are you doing this? Any of those worry you more than others? I know I just ran through 7 different.
No. Yeah, let me try to remember them all. So let me working backward. Wait, what was the last one you just said? I was thinking about 3 different things.
The time it took.
The time, right. So I'm not worried necessarily about that one now on the motion to dismiss phase, because again, motions to dismiss are not really, that's not when you make a lot of big decisions. I do think that's going to be something that you're going to see a lot of down at the motion for summary judgment stage when they can build up the facts and everything to show the timing of all these things. But I don't think the complaints have the information necessary to rely on that. I think the arguments on consideration and frustration of purpose, I don't think they're the strongest arguments. I don't know whether the judge will dismiss them or not. I think that Judge Cooper's tendency right now is to say, as big as all this stuff is, we're going to let things go forward and we're going to build up the facts about it. And if we've got to dismiss it or get rid of it later, we will. But I don't think that he's very inclined to foreclose major things. I think the one that's probably most likely to get flat out dismissed is that statutory antitrust claim. Just because by everything I've read about it, and I did my own research on this a little bit, it's an important thing, but it doesn't really apply under the facts of this case. But again, I don't think that's all that important because they've got kind of the same arguments built into other defenses and claims.
What about the sovereign immunity?
So the sovereign immunity is interesting because there's 2 different aspects to that. One is whether the Florida court has any right to determine whether the North Carolina court has jurisdiction over Florida. And that's basically part of what that argument is Florida State is saying that the North Carolina court got it wrong because we have sovereign immunity, we can't be sued there. But Judge Cooper's he's not an appellate judge for that. So I don't think that he can address that. And what all the ACC is saying is that's not really an argument that you can be making here. That's something that's got to go through its own appellate process. So I don't know what the judge will do with that. I don't think that he's going to get into that himself. But I think even if he did, I don't think that he would find that sovereign immunity prevents that claim out there.
Yeah. We talked a little bit offline, and we'll wrap up here unless there's anything else major
Mm-hmm.
that you have kind of on your mind. But we talked offline about what could and couldn't be appealed. We've already talked about jurisdiction, but what about some of these other points? If they're if the dismissal is approved, if the dismissal is denied, can folks appeal other things? Or let's talk through that a little bit.
Sure. So in Florida, most issues in a case do not get appealed until the end of the case. You go all the way through to final judgment, then you take an appeal and you bring up all your issues at that point. There are certain things that the rules allow us to bring earlier because it wouldn't make sense for that to happen. For example, jurisdiction. You can appeal jurisdiction rulings right away because it would make absolutely no sense to say that there's jurisdiction in the case, not allow an appeal the other way, then go through years of litigation, and then have a court say there was never jurisdiction here to begin with. So the rules allow that direct appeal. We also can have like the motion to stay the whole case that the judge already denied. That can go up, but not by direct appeal. It can go up by what's called certiorari, which is it's discretionary for the court, but it would probably be taken up. And that's sitting up there right now. And actually, I just saw before we got on that the First District Court of Appeal has given FSU 5 days to respond to the motion to stay the whole case pending these appeals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we have all these different motions to stay, and those are out there. So that could happen anyway. And certainly if it's stayed, they've got to be able to appeal the substantive things. And then if the judge, again, like I said, if the judge finds jurisdiction, they can go up. But then when you get to these other issues, like does the statute apply, or is estoppel controlling, or should this be dismissed because there's not consideration? All those things, all the breach of contract, all those things, none of that can be appealed until the end of the case.
Gotcha.
So we're not going to have final answers to those things until you get all the way through the case, if we ever get that far.
We've talked to Doug a lot about this, and he has kind of been of the mind that this would never make it to final judgment in either case, that it would end up just being settled beforehand. Do you fall in line with that? Do you think that's probably true with both these cases as well? Maybe same with Clemson, if you want to speculate on all four, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'll agree. Yeah, I agree with when you qualified it and said probably. I agree because this is such a business thing. It makes no sense for this to go through. It is such a huge potential loss for everybody, and everybody's got to survive this. It just doesn't make sense for them to do this. That said, the fact that the most cases settle, and most cases settle at mediation, or if they don't settle there, they settle after. The judge spent probably 30 or 40 minutes today talking about how great mediation is again. He clearly wants them to mediate. But my concern is, while mediation is great, settlement is great, if the parties don't want to do it, it's not going to happen. And I was one who believed about a year and a half ago this would all be wrapped up completely. And I believed that we were going to announce before 8/15 last year, and that we were going to the Big Ten, and we already had a deal cut. I complete swing and a miss, but that's what I thought. My concern is the further we get down the road, and we don't hear anybody talking, and we don't hear any suggestion that they're getting close to getting it resolved, I start asking myself, well, what's going to change? This is business. It's better for everybody to not have the uncertainty and have this behind them. So there has to be something preventing them from talking. And I just want to know what's going to change. And it might be ESPN saying, next February, we're not going to extend the contract. It could be that you get a couple of really good rulings in a case and that scare people. I mean, but something's going to have to happen to get this thing resolved. Yeah, and the judge pointed out some stuff today that was really pretty smart. He said this was in response to something the judge said. The ACC said, our problem is if we go to mediation, and not that we won't go, but when we go, there's all these other parties impacted. We can't make a deal without every team agreeing, without ESPN agreeing, and without all these other things. So it's just hard.
Anything else high level? Any other thoughts before we close out? If not, you can shout out your Twitter and people can follow you for some updates through this. But anything else high level you want to bring up or discuss?
I'm trying to think of anything else that's really come up recently. I mean, I think we're just at a point where we need substantive stuff to start happening. This was filed in December. We're now in mid-June, and we still haven't had any real discovery and not a single deposition. And my concern with timing is that everything we're dealing with right now is all going up on appeal here and in North Carolina. And South Carolina is getting slower and slower. I mean, they had that motion for summary judgment filed, but that's already been objected to, and I don't think that's going to get heard. So, my question is, when are we going to start doing anything? And I don't know that anything's going to happen until 25. And I'm just
Yeah.
talking about in terms of real discovery.
All right. I appreciate Hal for joining us and chatting just a little bit about this court case that he was in person for there in Tallahassee, kind of batting, pinch hitting for Doug as he's out of town. I'll link his Twitter account that you can check out. He does a good job of kind of providing some analysis on what all's going on with this case, just like Doug does. Another one for you to check out. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Next time, Doug will be back by the next time we have one of these. So, you guys go shout Hal out on Twitter for batting pinch hit for us today. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. We do these updates often. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. Go Noles.